Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever time you are watching this, of course. So this is my speech 4. Uh, Now, I know it was supposed to be on social change, but being that we did talk about it back on with my speech 3, we were consider I wanted to do the Beatles, and it was very argumentation based. So that's of course what I went with. Uh, I don't think I really need to say much more. So start off my title. The Beatles are the best band to have ever existed. And thus begins my speech. How many of you have ever heard of the Beatles? I'm sure most of you have. Perhaps you've heard of them without realizing it. For instance, they wrote Here Comes the Sun and Yellow Submarine, and I'm sure you've heard those songs. The reason some of you may not be too familiar with the Beatles is because they were a band back in the 60s, and they split up in 1970 and go into their solo careers. Though, believe it or not, billions of people still listen to their music today, and a lot of today's musicians were inspired by them. Let's face it, the Beatles are the best band to ever exist, because people, including young toddlers, still go crazy about their music. They sparked a change in rock and roll and pop music forever, and they made multiple top 100 lists with multiple songs and albums at the same time. You ever hear of Beatlemania? Well, there's a good reason for it. When their music was first coming out, people went nuts over it. And some don't even know why. Something just overtook them. They even got an entire rock band game about their music alone. According to an article, Why Kids Still Go Crazy for the Beatles, from the Gale Literature Resource Center, the Beatles' complete collection is being reissued on Wednesday in a remastered box set, the same day as the release of the Beatles Rock Band video game. And the biggest fans of this week's releases may actually be the littlest ones. The article is a transcript of some sort of interview with Dr. DeForia Lane, who works regularly with young children. According to Dr. Lane, the Beatles have repetition, predictability, and rhythm, and in certain cases, it literally paints a picture for children. And quite frankly, the beat makes you want to move. There's a concept in music called entrainment, and that means you literally synchronize with the music. So children can be slow in early morning at the rock hall, but the minute the music is on, the child is too. A lot of their songs contained imagery, something we all like. But kids especially, according to Dr. Lane. When you look at the imagery created in that, we would sing and dance around. I like to be under the sea, an octopus's garden in the shade. It's one of those imaginary ways a child can enter into a song, just the words alone. I'd like to start this next part with a quote from Detroit Free Press, written by Mitch Albom. So let me explain why the Beatles actually are worth commemorating. Let's start with this. 50 years later, their music is still better than today's. Yep, I said it. I won't take it back. If Katy Perry wants to argue, bring it on. If Lady Gaga takes exception, I'll raise it. If Justin Bieber wants to, forget it. That's not even fair. As someone who simply enjoys older music over that of today's music, I can contest to that. He then goes on to say, the Beatles were better. Their song construction, their melody lines, their harmonies, their lyrics, their inventiveness, their breakthrough use of symphonic instruments, all done at a time when, if you got it wrong, you had to record the whole thing again. You couldn't just fix it with a computer key. Combined to make the 7 years the Beatles recorded together the richest production of pop music ever created by a group. He even goes to say just how inventive and new they were for 3 years after the suits, ties, and mop-top haircuts of the Sullivan Show. They were exploring corners of pop music no one had ever tried. Creating thematic albums like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and Magical Mystery Tour that featured French horns and trumpets and timpani drums. Later they would bring in sitar music, cellos, violas. Listen to Eleanor Rigby, released in 1966, and tell me what other artists of their time could have done that. It is complex, hardly rock and roll, yet it is catchy and memorable, and people around the world still sing the line, "Ah, look at all the lonely people," which is probably more poetic than anything Kanye West ever has written. By 68 and 69, the Beatles were on warp drive. Let's start this next paragraph off with, during the week of April 4th, 1964, the Beatles occupied the top 5 positions on the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart. That quote comes from hooksandharmony.com. Also, according to hooksandharmony.com, they hold the record for the group with the longest span between number 1 albums in the Billboard Albums chart, 36 years and 51 weeks, 1964 to 2001. The website also goes to say that they were groundbreaking pioneers, almost from the beginning, being the first group to ever employ feedback in 1964's I Feel Fine. One of their first hits, A Hard Day's Night, features an opening chord so revolutionary that it took almost 45 years for someone to figure out how they played it. The Beatles are simply the best to ever be. For kids today, still enjoy them. They changed the course of popular music forever, and they achieved many amazing feats. The Beatles were the only band to ever produce a worldwide mania that had everyone listening to them. They helped form many new genres. They branched the genres of the 50s into the psychedelic sounds of the late 60s and 70s through their consistent experimentations with new ideas and forms. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my speech, and I hope you choose to listen to the Beatles more often, or at least grow in your appreciation of what they did for the future of music.